believe it was for us. He hung and suffered there. He died that we might be forgiven. He died to make us good, that we might go at last to Him, saved by His precious blood. There was no other good enough to pay the price of sin. He only could unlock the gate of heaven and let us in. Oh, dearly, dearly has He loved, and we must love Him too, and trust in His redeeming blood, and try His works to do.
When Jesus and his friends had finished their goodbye meal, they walked to a garden to pray. That's where Jesus' enemies found him. The men had torches and clubs and sticks, and they were very frightening. And right in front was Judas, who had been one of Jesus' friends. Judas crept up to Jesus and kissed him on the cheek. "This is the man you want," said Judas. "Arrest him." Jesus looked very sad. And Jesus' friends were scared. Most of them ran away, but not Peter. He pulled out a sword and started swinging it. "Put your sword away," said Jesus. "This is not the time for fighting. I have to go with them. God wants me to." So they grabbed Jesus and dragged him before the religious leaders, the ones who were jealous of him. And his trial took all night. "He says he will destroy our temple," says one man. "He says he is a king," said another. "He's a troublemaker," said one and all. None of this was true, of course, but it didn't matter because the leaders had already made up their minds. Jesus was different from them, and Jesus wouldn't do what they said, so he would have to die. And they beat Jesus, and they hit him hard, and then they took away his clothes and put an old robe around his shoulders and jammed a crown made of thorns on his head. And while the blood ran down his forehead, they called him names and made fun of him. "So you think you're a king," they laughed. "Well, look at you now." Jesus never said a word. His body hurt, his heart was breaking, but he never said a word. And they took a cross next, made of heavy wood, and they laid it on his back. "Move along," they shouted, and they led him through the city. Some people cried when they saw him, and others cheered. But all of them followed as he lugged that cross through the city gates and up a nearby hill. When they got to the top, they laid Jesus on the cross and nailed him to it. It hurt so much. Then they raised the cross so that everyone could see, and they left him there to die. A thief hanging next to him was afraid, but Jesus talked to him and helped him to feel better. Jesus' mother was there too, standing in the crowd. And so Jesus called out to one of his friends, "Take care of her for me, will you, John? She's your mother now." But most of the faces in the crowd were not so kind. "You saved other people," someone laughed, "so why can't you save yourself?" Jesus knew why. It wasn't because his enemies had won. It was because God wanted him there to take away all the bad things that anyone had ever done. And soon the sky grew dark and the earth shook. It was as if God's own heart was breaking. And then it happened. "It is done," Jesus whispered. And the sadness and in the dark, he died.
Let me be honest before I make start. I don't give a fig and I don't give my heart. I've not cared for no one in this poxy city I've hung many Jews, I don't care, it's not pretty. In Rome where we fight and proffer no pity. So one day about noon, when I'm out on the street and walking and talking to folks on me beat, I happen to hear in the roads up ahead a right carry on, it had to be said. I listened for a while and heard the shouts spread. It was Sunday, so usually there's never a noise. You hear the girls sing, I'm just one of the boys. But this lot were all joyful, palm branches they waved, and shouting and screaming of how they'd be saved. No way to behave for a nation enslaved. The crowds were all shouting at the tops of their voice. The Jews wanted rights and a king of their choice. I stood there in horror and knew right away if my emperor saw this, he'd know what to say. Me head on the block, I felt utter dismay. In the middle of it all was a man on an ass, a wise, handsome chap, but still working class. On streets filled with leaves, his little beast walked. Arms waved in the air whilst other folk talked. And still I just watched, mouth open, I gawked. He comes walking by, a kind smile on his face. I feel sort of warm, but my soul's a disgrace. I wanted to follow and break my typecast, but my feet wouldn't move, they just held there fast. Before I could blink, the moment had passed. Days later, I find he was still in me head, like a slow burning oven what's crisping the bread. They've let go a murderer for goodness knows what, and arrested this chap. They're all losing the plot. A few centuries later, and they'd all have been shot. When Friday comes, and it's payday for us, there's no time to relax. You should hear all the fuss. It's festival time, but this one's turning sour. There's a man with a cross, and it cometh his hour. Seems the Romans and Jews thought he wanted their power. They tied him to the cross and nailed hands and feet. A professional job. We Romans are neat. On top of a hill with two other men, they raised this man up and mocked him again. When he finally died, I gave thanks with amen. When I looked at the face of this man I held dear, I hadn't the strength for to pierce him with spear. The love that he'd showed when he passed me by, the forgiveness was vast from his blackened eye. I just stood at his feet and I started to cry.
After these things, Joseph of Arimathea, who was a disciple of Jesus, though a secret one because of his fear of the Jews, asked Pilate to let him to take the body of Jesus away. Pilate gave him permission, and so he came and removed his body. Nicodemus, who had at first come to Jesus by night, also came, bringing a mixture of myrrh and aloes, weighing about 100 pounds. They took the body of Jesus and wrapped it with the spices in linen cloths, according to the burial customs of the Jews. Now there was a garden in the place where he was crucified, and in the garden there was a new tomb, which no one had ever been laid. And so, because it was the day of preparation, and the tomb was nearby, they laid Jesus there.